Continuing on with our look at chemical methods of controlling microorganisms, we have surfactants. Surfactants represents our surface active agents, and they lower the surface tension of water. Basically what that means is they lower the connection that water molecules have to one another. If you've ever had a cup of water sitting out for a couple of days, you'll notice it gets almost like this film on the top of it. And what happens is as those water molecules are sitting there, they start to join up with one another. They start to be connected by hydrogen bonds, and so they're kind of held in place. And that's referred to as surface tension. Surfactants lower the surface tension of water. In other words, they prevent water from joining together, the water molecules from joining together. And surfactants are found in soaps and detergents. That's the major ingredient that we see with soaps and detergents. Soaps are essentially salts. So this would be an example of a salt of sodium that's in a particular soap. They're long chain fatty acids. They have polar and non-polar regions. So when we talk about that, you'll notice we have this hydrophilic head and this hydrophobic tail. Hydrophilic means water loving. So these hydrophilic areas here would be attracted to water soluble compounds like carbohydrates or proteins. And then the hydrophobic tail down here means water fearing. This is going to be attracted to your lipids and your fats who, we know don't dissolve in water. So essentially what happens is that we get some interactions between these different areas of the molecule with the compounds that are, in our clothes or on our hands, and this creates emulsions. And this lifts away the dirt, lifts away the microbes from surfaces and skin. They're not necessarily considered antiseptics or disinfectants because they don't directly kill microbes or inhibit the microbial growth. However, they can be considered degerming agents because they're physically lifting and carrying away the microorganisms. Some soaps have had, bacteriostatic or bactericidal agents added to them, and so those would be considered, disinfectants. Detergents often contain synthetic surfactants and are more soluble in water and don't leave behind any type of residues. Anionic detergents are what we find, in laundry detergents. They have a negatively charged anion at one end, and then we have cationic detergents have a positively charged end. And cationic detergents include a particular class called the quats, or quaternary ammonium salts. They have the ability to get into the phospholipid bilayer of the bacterium and disrupt the membrane. So they are actually disinfectants because they can damage the membrane of the bacterial cells. They're very stable, they're non-toxic, they're pretty cheap. They can also be effective against other microbes besides just bacteria. Benzoylconium chloride is one of the major quats that's in use right now, and we find this in Lysol. We also find this in antiseptics because it's safe to use on the surface of the skin. It can also be found in mouthwashes or other like antiseptic mouth rinses as well. So here's kind of an example. This is a acetylpyridinium, which is one of the quads, and here's benzoylconium over here. And basically what happens, you see you've got this cell membrane here, this phospholipid bilayer, and the acetylpyridinium gets in there and disrupts that. And what's going to happen is the cellular contents are going to leak out, and this cell is then going to die. Another group of chemicals that we can use are Bisbaygunids. Chlorhexidine is an example of a bisbaygunide. These were synthesized about 100 years ago. They're cationic, or they're positively charged. They're very broad spectrum against not just bacteria but also yeasts. Disrupt cell membranes. Another one is Alexidine. Can be used as a surgical scrub. It's faster acting, so we don't have to have as long of a time of exposure for the Alexidine as we do the chlorhexidine. So those are the Bisbaygunids. Then we have the alkylating agents. These are a group of disinfectants that can inactivate enzymes, which are a group of proteins, as well as nucleic acids. And these are going to be things like formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde. The problem with formaldehyde, it is a biocide. It can kill different microorganisms, but it is carcinogenic. It's very irritating to living tissue. So we more so use it as a preservative, because it's going to inhibit the microbes, but we can't use it really as a disinfectant or antiseptic out just in the environment. Glutaraldehyde is marketed under the name Sidex. It is not a carcinogen like formaldehyde is, and so it can be used for sterilization. A new group are OPAs, or phthalaldehyde, say that 3 times fast, and it is a little bit safer than glutaraldehyde, so we're starting to see it used a little bit more, less irritating to the skin, so a little bit safer to use. Ethylene oxide is a gas, and it can be used for gaseous sterilization. It's very highly penetrating. It can actually make its way through plastic bags. It can be used to sterilize pieces of medical equipment and other equipment. However, it is carcinogenic. It's also explosive. So it has to be used in a very controlled manner. Propional Lactone is another type of alkylating agent. It can be used in liquid form or as a gas. We see this used in vaccines because it makes the vaccines sterile and prevents any microbial contamination. It can be an irritant, so we don't, like to spray it or use it, very often. But it is quickly metabolized. That's why it can be used in vaccines. It's quickly metabolized and made into lactic acid so that it can be discarded as a waste product from the body. Then we get to peroxygens. Peroxygens can be used as both disinfectants and antiseptics because they aren't irritating to the skin. The most widely used peroxygen is hydrogen peroxide. You can buy over the counter. It's a 3% hydrogen peroxide solution. Breaks down into water and hydrogen gas, so it's safe for the environment. It's safe for skin, non-toxic. It could lead to damage of the skin, but we really don't see this very often. It produces what we call free radicals, which are unlinked ions, and they can damage the macromolecules within the cell, so carbohydrates or proteins. It can be used as a sterilant, but we have to look at time of exposure and concentration. Benzoyl peroxide is another peroxygen that can be used in acne medication. We see it in a lot of the over-the-counter acne medications because it kills Propionibacterium acnes, which is a member of the skin flora that can lead to acne. Another peroxygen is ozone gas. Ozone gas is used as an alternative to chlorine in a lot of water purification systems. It's a lot more expensive than chlorine, so a lot of, municipal systems can't really afford that, and so that's why they stick with chlorine. Another type of chemical agent are supercritical fluids, what we refer to as supercritical carbon dioxide. A supercritical means that we increase the pressure, and when we increase the pressure on a particular substance, it has this state that's kind of between a liquid and a gas. Supercritical carbon dioxide can penetrate surfaces, so it makes it a very good sterilizing agent. It gets into the cells and produces carbonic acid, which then lowers the pH, and we know that most organisms need a neutral pH in order to survive. Supercritical carbon dioxide is non-reactive, it's non-toxic, it's non-flammable, so it can be used pretty easily compared to just regular carbon dioxide. And then we look at the chemicals that we can put in foods. We want foods to be shelf stable, so we have to put preservatives in there to inhibit microbial growth. Sorbic acid, benzoic acid, propionic acid, potassium sorbate, sodium benzoate, and calcium propionate. These are all used to control the growth of molds. They're non-toxic. We metabolize them, meaning we can break them down. We also can use sulfur dioxide and nitrites, but we're starting to see, some people have allergies to sulfites. Other people don't tolerate nitrites very well. They can be converted into nitrosamines, which can be carcinogenic. So we have to be careful with the chemicals that we use for food preservation. Just like we saw in the last section, there's a good table here for summarizing our chemical disinfectants, what they are, what they do, and basically how they can be used.